Ava didn't know how long they ran. Time had stopped behaving normally in the war zone. Every second stretched like rubber, long, suffocating, unpredictable. The battlefield behind them roared with gunfire and explosions, but ahead was only broken terrain, collapsing buildings, and the faint hope of Echo 7 extraction. Her injured comrade, Private Daniel Reyes, was barely keeping up. His breaths were shallow, uneven. Every few meters he collapsed onto his knees before forcing himself back up again. Ava had stopped counting how many times she had dragged him to his feet. "Don't stop," he muttered through clenched teeth. "I'm not stopping," Ava replied instantly. "You're just slowing down my run." It was a lie meant to keep him conscious. She knew he was fatting. Her shoulder burned where the bullet had grazed her armor earlier. Adrenaline kept it numb, but she could feel the warmth of blood seeping through her sleeve. She ignored it. "Focus. Move. Survive." A distant explosion lit the sky behind them like a second sunrise. Russian artillery. They were still tracking movement in the sector. Ava pulled Reyes behind the shell of a destroyed civilian vehicle. The metal was twisted, half melted, but it provided enough cover to breathe for a moment. "Stay here," she ordered. "No," he grabbed her wrist weakly. "Don't leave me." "I'm not leaving you," she said sharply. "I'm making sure we don't die right here." She peeked over the wreck. The road ahead was a kill zone, open ground with no cover for at least 200 meters. Beyond that, the silhouette of a collapsed highway bridge marked the direction of Echo 7. But between them and that bridge movement. Figures. At least 6 Russian soldiers moving methodically through debris, clearing survivors and securing routes. Ava ducked back down. "Problem," Reyes whispered. "Yeah," she said quietly, "a big one." She checked her magazine. Low ammo, not enough for a prolonged fight. Her radio crackled again suddenly. This time clearer. "Any surviving U.S. units, this is Echo 7 command relay. Extraction window is closing in 18 minutes. Repeat, 18 minutes." Ava clenched her jaw. 18 minutes in this place felt like 18 hours. She looked at Reyes, then at the open road, then back at him. A decision formed. "You're going to crawl when I say crawl," she told him. "I can't." "You can," she cut him off. "Because if you don't, neither of us makes it to that bridge." She checked her rifle again. Then something shifted in her eyes. Not fear. Not panic. Something colder. Focus sharpened into instinct. She leaned out and fired. One shot. A Russian soldier dropped instantly. The others reacted immediately. Return fire erupted, bullets shredding the wreckage around them. "Now," Ava shouted. She grabbed Reyes by his vest and dragged him out into the open road. They ran. Or rather, she ran while dragging him. Bullets chased them like angry insects, kicking up asphalt and dust around their feet. Every step felt like running through a storm of invisible knives. Reyes screamed in pain as his injured leg gave out, but Ava refused to let him fall completely. She practically carried him the last stretch. The bridge loomed closer. Half collapsed, burning wreckage hanging from broken concrete supports. Behind them, Russian voices grew louder. They were closing in. Ava slid behind a concrete pillar at the edge of the bridge, both of them collapsing into cover. Reyes coughed violently. "We're not going to make it," he whispered. Ava grabbed his face. "Listen to me," she said firmly. "You are going to make it. I did not drag you across half a war zone for you to quit now." Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried something stronger than orders. Belief. She checked the battlefield again. 3 enemies advancing. Then 5 more joining from the side. They were being surrounded. No reinforcements. No backup. Just her. And time running out. Ava reached into her vest and pulled out a smoke grenade. Reyes noticed. You're not going to. Shut up, she said calmly, and start crawling when I tell you to. She pulled the pin. The grenade hissed. Go. She threw it toward the advancing soldiers. White smoke exploded across the battlefield, swallowing vision instantly. Ava fired through the smoke blindly, covering their movement. She grabbed Reyes again and dragged him under the bridge structure. Above them, bullets slammed into concrete. Chunks of stone fell around them like rain. They were underneath the ruined bridge now, dark, unstable, dangerous. But hidden. Ava pressed Reyes against a support beam and quickly checked his wound again. You're bleeding more, she said under her breath. He laughed weakly. Yeah, I noticed. Don't get funny with me. I think I'm gonna pass out. Then don't, she snapped. Stay awake, look at me. His eyes struggled to stay open. Ava tore a strip from her uniform and tightened the bandage. Above them, footsteps echoed across the bridge. Enemies. Close. Ava slowly raised her rifle. She whispered, Stay quiet. Reyes nodded faintly. The footsteps stopped directly above them. Silence. Ava held her breath. 1 second. 2. A Russian voice spoke above in sharp commands. Then, a boot stepped onto unstable concrete. A crack echoed. Ava tensed. The structure above them groaned under weight. And then, a massive section of the bridge shifted. Dust rained down. Ava's eyes widened. Move, she shouted. She grabbed Reyes and pulled him just as part of the bridge collapsed, crashing down where they had been seconds earlier. The explosion of concrete and steel created chaos. Above them, screams. Gunfire. Confusion. Ava didn't wait. This is our exit, she yelled. She dragged Reyes through the collapsing underside of the bridge, using the chaos as cover. Explosions in the distance suggested Allied artillery or incoming air support, but she couldn't be sure. All she knew was movement. Survival. The Echo 7 extraction point was still ahead. But so was the enemy. And time was running out. As they crawled out from the bridge's shadow, Ava looked forward into the smoke-covered horizon. A faint signal flare lit up in the distance. Green. Friendly. Hoping. But between them and it, the war was still waiting. And it was not done with them yet. The green flare hung in the sky like a fragile promise. It wasn't close, it wasn't safe, but it was real. Ava stared at it through the drifting smoke, calculating distance, without even realizing she was doing it. Somewhere beyond that flare was Echo 7 extraction. Somewhere beyond that was survival. But between them and it, war still breathed. Reyes coughed violently beside her, barely conscious now. His face was pale, lips dry, eyes half-lidded. Hey, Ava said sharply, grabbing his collar. Stay with me, you see that flare? He blinked slowly. Yeah. That's us, that's getting out, but you don't get to go there by sleeping on me, understood? A weak nod. Good enough. Ava checked her ammo again. Low. Too low. She peeked around the broken concrete. The battlefield had shifted after the bridge collapse. Smoke covered most sightlines, but movement was still visible. Russian squads regrouping, scanning, tightening their perimeter. They weren't just searching anymore. They were hunting. Ava lowered her head. We're behind enemy lines, she muttered. Reyes gave a faint, almost ironic laugh. Feels like it. Ava didn't respond. Humor didn't change reality. She scanned their surroundings. Collapsed urban ruins stretched in every direction. A half-destroyed industrial district lay ahead, full of broken warehouses and rusted containers. It wasn't safe, but it offered cover. Cover meant movement. Movement meant life. "All right," she said, "we're going through the industrial zone." Reyes weakly grabbed her arm. We can't fight them all." "We're not fighting them all," she replied. "We're avoiding them." A distant explosion shook the ground. Ava flinched slightly, but kept her focus. Above them, drones buzzed faintly through the smoke clouds, recon units. The war was watching from above now. They had no sky to hide in. Only shadows. Ava tore a reflective strip from Reyes' vest and rubbed dirt over it, dulling any shine. "Crawl when I tell you," she said. "Don't argue, don't think, just move." Reyes nodded again, weaker this time. Ava checked the flare direction once more. Then they moved. Every step through the industrial ruins felt like walking through the bones of a dead city. Metal groaned in the wind. Burnt-out containers leaned like broken teeth. The ground was unstable, littered with glass and twisted rebar. Ava moved ahead, low and silent, scanning constantly. Reyes dragged himself behind her. Minutes passed. Or maybe seconds. It was impossible to tell. Then, a sound. Ava froze instantly. Bootsteps. Multiple. She dropped behind a rusted container and pulled Reyes down with her. Through a gap in the metal, she saw them. Russian infantry patrol. 6 soldiers. Slow, methodical, sweeping the area. Too close. Way too close. Reyes whispered, barely audible, "We're done." Ava shot him a glare that silenced him instantly. "No," she mouthed. She checked her rifle. 1 magazine left. 1 chance. She scanned the environment quickly. Then she saw it. A fuel leak. Old pipeline rupture near the container field, oil dripping into a shallow pool. If ignited, her mind calculated instantly. Dangerous. Loud. But it would create chaos. A distraction. Ava looked at Reyes. Then back at the patrol. She made a decision. "Cover your ears," she whispered. Reyes frowned weakly, but obeyed. Ava pulled out her last grenade. But instead of throwing it immediately, she hesitated. This wasn't just a distraction. It was a gamble. If the explosion was too small, they'd be caught. If too big, they'd be seen. No perfect outcome. Just survival probability. She exhaled. Then threw. The grenade landed directly near the leaking fuel. For half a second. Nothing. Then, boom. A chain reaction ignited across the spilled fuel. Fire erupted violently, racing through the pipeline remnants like a living beast. The explosion wasn't just loud, it was monstrous. The Russian patrol scattered instantly, shouting into radios, turning away from Ava's position to respond to the fire outbreak. Chaos swallowed their formation. "Gio," Ava hissed. She grabbed Reyes and dragged him forward through the opposite direction, using the noise as cover. They ran, or staggered, or survived in motion. Behind them, gunfire erupted, not aimed at them anymore, but at the spreading fire and suspected sabotage. The industrial zone became a battlefield of confusion. Ava didn't look back. She couldn't afford to. They reached a narrow alley between collapsed warehouses. Ava finally stopped, pressing Reyes against the wall. He was barely conscious now. "Hey," she said urgently, tapping his face. "Stay awake, look at me." His eyes barely opened. "We're close," she lied again, but this time it wasn't far from truth. The flare was brighter now. Closer. But so were footsteps behind them. Ava turned her head slightly. Shadows. Multiple. The Russians had adapted faster than expected. They were flanking. Ava's jaw tightened. "No more running in straight lines," she whispered. Reyes swallowed weakly. "I can't run anymore." "You don't need to," she said. She checked her weapon, then made the hardest decision yet. She pressed her spare magazine into his vest. "If I say run, you run toward that flare." He shook his head slightly. "No, you'll die." Ava didn't answer, because there was no time for lies anymore. She peeked around the corner. 3 enemies advancing. Then more behind them. Too many for stealth now. The only option left. Delay. She stood slowly. Reyes grabbed her wrist weakly. "Do." Ava looked at him. For the first time, her expression softened. "You make it to that flare," she said quietly, "or I dragged you through all this for nothing." Then she stood and stepped into the alley. The first shot she fired dropped the lead soldier instantly. The alley erupted into chaos. Return fire slammed into walls, sparks flying as bullets tore through metal and concrete. Ava moved like she wasn't even thinking anymore. Cover to cover. Shot. Reload. Move. Again. Her shoulder screamed in pain now, the earlier wound catching up, but she ignored it. One soldier rushed her flank. She pivoted and struck him with the rifle butt, dropping him instantly. Another raised his weapon. She fired before he could. The alley became a storm of movement, smoke and fire. But Ava wasn't trying to win. She was buying time. Behind her she heard it. Reyes crawling. Slowly. Painfully. But moving. Good. That's all that mattered. Ava backed deeper into the alley, drawing fire away from him. "Gio," she shouted without turning. Reyes hesitated, then disappeared toward the flare. Ava exhaled once, then turned back toward the advancing soldiers. Her rifle clicked. Empty. She dropped it, pulled her sidearm, and faced them alone. The war didn't pause. It didn't care. It just kept coming. And Ava Mitchell, alone in the smoke, bleeding, exhausted, stood her ground anyway. Because behind her, someone was still trying to live. And that was enough reason not to fall. The alley felt smaller now. Not because the walls had changed, but because the war had closed in around it. Ava stood alone, pistol raised, breathing controlled but heavy. The smoke from the earlier explosion still drifted through the broken industrial zone, twisting visibility into something unreliable and cruel. No footsteps yet. But she knew they were coming. They always came. Her fingers tightened around the grip of her sidearm. One magazine left, limited rounds, no backup, no extraction support in sight. Just delay. Just survive long enough for Reyes to reach the flare. That was the mission now. Not victory. Not retreat. Just time. A faint voice crackled in her damaged radio again, barely readable through static. Echo 7 final window, 5 minutes. Ava closed her eyes for half a second. 5 minutes. In a normal world, 5 minutes meant nothing. In this world, it was everything. A distant metallic clang echoed through the alley. Then another. She opened her eyes. Shadows moved at the entrance. 3 Russian soldiers advanced cautiously, weapons raised, scanning the alley like predators entering a narrow cave. Ava didn't move. Not yet. Let them come closer. One step. Then another. The lead soldier raised his hand, signaling silence to his team. Too confident. Too close. Ava exhaled slowly, then stepped out. The first shot dropped the lead soldier instantly. The second shot hit the man behind him before he could react. The third grazed the wall as the remaining soldier fired back wildly. The alley exploded into chaos again. Ava rolled behind a container, bullets ripping into metal above her head. She could feel vibrations through the structure, each impact like a hammer against her bones. She peeked out. One enemy left in her immediate line. But she could hear more approaching from behind. They had adapted. They were surrounding her now. Not rushing. Catching. Ava's jaw tightened. Smart, she muttered under her breath. Too smart. She checked her pistol. 4 rounds left. That was it. No more mistakes. A shadow appeared at the far end of the alley. Then another. And another. They were cutting off escape completely now. Ava stepped out into the open. She didn't retreat. She didn't run. Because running no longer mattered. Only direction did. She raised her pistol and fired again. One enemy fell. Then she moved forward instead of backward. That surprised them. A pause. Just enough hesitation. Ava used it. She sprinted forward through the alley, firing as she moved, forcing them to break formation. One soldier tried to flank her. She slammed him into the wall, disarmed him, and pushed him back into his own advancing unit. Chaos again. But this time controlled chaos. Ava wasn't surviving anymore. She was shaping the fight. But she was still human. And humans run out of energy. A bullet struck near her leg, sending a shock through the ground. She stumbled but didn't fall. Her breathing was sharp now. Forced. She ducked behind a broken doorway, chest rising fast. Come on, she whispered to herself. The radio crackled again. Echo 7 extraction, final minute. Ava looked down the alley. Through the smoke and destruction, she could see it faintly now, the glow of the green flare in the distance. Reyes had made it. He had reached it. Good. That meant everything she did wasn't wasted. A distant explosion shook the ground. Incoming artillery. Not theirs. Enemy suppression fire. The Russians were escalating now. The whole zone was being flattened. Ava stood again. Because staying down meant dying slow. And she didn't have time for slow. The next wave hit harder. 4 soldiers rushed the alley together this time, firing in bursts, forcing Ava into deeper cover. She returned fire instantly, dropping one before rolling out of sight. But the pressure was increasing. They were tightening the net. She felt it. Like the war itself was pressing inward. Ava fired her last magazine. Click. Empty. She froze for a fraction of a second. Then dropped the pistol. And picked up a fallen enemy rifle. Heavy. Unfamiliar. But functional. Good enough. She stepped forward again. Because now there was no more retreat. Only forward motion. She pushed through the smoke, firing short controlled bursts, forcing them back. But then, a sudden impact hit her side. Not a bullet. A blast. She was thrown into the ground as an explosion went off nearby, sending debris crashing around her. Her ears rang instantly. Vision blurred. She blinked hard. Blood trickled from her forehead. The world tilted for a moment. Then stabilized. She tried to stand. Her leg trembled. But she did. A shadow loomed in front of her. One soldier stood over her now. Weapon raised. Ava looked up at him. He looked young. Just like Reyes. For a split second, everything slowed. Not fear. Not anger. Just awareness. He hesitated. That hesitation saved her. Ava lunged forward and slammed the rifle into his chest, knocking him back. She followed with a second strike, disarming him completely. He fell. She didn't finish him. No time. No need. She turned and saw more soldiers approaching. Too many. Too close. This was it. The final line. Ava exhaled. Not in defeat, but acceptance. She raised her rifle again, even though it was almost over, because someone still had to hold the line for just a few more seconds. Behind her, the flare still burned. Reyes was alive. Extraction was still possible. That was enough. Ava stepped forward into the smoke one last time and fired. The battlefield swallowed her silhouette as the war roared around her. And for a brief moment, she was not a medic, not a soldier, just a wall, standing between chaos and escape. The world had narrowed into noise. Gunfire, collapsing metal, distant artillery, everything blended into a single violent pulse that pressed against Ava's skull. Her vision kept flickering at the edges, like the battlefield itself was trying to shut her eyes for her. But she stayed upright. Barely. Ava's rifle felt heavier now, as if it no longer belonged to her hands. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. Blood from the earlier blast had dried across her forehead, darkening her eyelashes. Still she moved, because the flare was still there. Green, steady, real. Reyes had made it. That meant there was still a chance. A crackle burst through her radio again, barely surviving the interference. Echo 7 extraction team inbound. Hold position. Hold position. Ava almost laughed at that. Hold position in a war zone that was actively collapsing around her wasn't an order. It was a miracle request. A sudden burst of gunfire snapped her back. 3 Russian soldiers pushed through the smoke at the end of the alley, advancing carefully now. No rush, no chaos. They knew she was exhausted. They were waiting for collapse. Ava tightened her grip on the rifle. One last time. She fired. The first shot dropped the nearest soldier. The second missed, her aim slipping for the first time. The third struck armor but didn't penetrate. They returned fire instantly. Bullets tore into the wall behind her, forcing her back into cover. A chunk of concrete exploded beside her shoulder, throwing dust into her lungs. She coughed hard. Her body was failing her now. But not her focus. Never her focus. Ava leaned against the wall for half a second, forcing air into her lungs. Just a little longer, she whispered. She pushed off the wall again and stepped back into the alley. The Russians had stopped advancing. That was worse. They were coordinating now, waiting for the final collapse. A drone buzzed overhead somewhere through the smoke, its faint mechanical hum almost mocking the silence between gunfire bursts. Ava looked up at it. So that was it. Eyes in the sky. No hiding anymore. She adjusted her grip on the rifle. Then she saw movement near the flare. Reyes, barely visible but alive, dragging himself closer to the extraction point marked by the green smoke signal. Ava's chest tightened. Good. He made it. That was the mission. That was everything. A distant roar filled the sky. Engines. Ava's head snapped upward. Through the smoke clouds she saw it. Helicopters. Fast approaching. Low altitude. American markings faint but visible through the haze. Echo 7 extraction. Finally, a wave of something almost like relief hit her, but it didn't last long. Because the Russians saw it too. And they weren't stopping. Ava turned back. The alley was full now, Not just a few soldiers. More. Dozens. Closing in from both ends. The net had fully collapsed. A final containment. She exhaled slowly. So this was the end of the road. But Reyes was still alive. And the helicopters were seconds away. Ava lifted her rifle. No more thoughts. Only action. She fired again. And moved forward into the smoke. The helicopters roared closer. Wind from their approach began to tear through the battlefield, lifting dust and debris into the air. A loudspeaker echoed faintly. U.S. extraction unit inbound, marking LZ. A green spotlight swept through the smoke, searching for survivors. It passed over Ava. Missed her. Then found Reyes. He raised his arm weakly. Ava saw it. He was there. At the flare. At the extraction point. A Russian soldier lunged toward him from the side. Ava reacted instantly. She sprinted. Faster than she thought she could. She slammed into the soldier mid-motion, knocking him off balance. They hit the ground hard. Ava didn't hesitate. She struck once. Twice. He stopped moving. She stood again immediately. Breathing hard. Everything was collapsing now. The helicopters lowered fast, rotor wash scattering smoke and debris in violent spirals. A rope dropped. Then another. Geo, 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 voices shouted from above. Reyes crawled toward it. Barely conscious. Hands shaking. Ava reached him just as he grabbed the rope. "Don't you dare stop now," she said, gripping his vest. He looked at her, barely able to focus. "You too," he whispered. Ava shook her head. "No." That single word carried everything she couldn't say. He was lifted first, slowly rising into the sky. Safe. Finally safe. Ava stepped back. Because there was no room for both of them in this moment. She watched him ascend. Alive. That was enough. But the Russians weren't done. Gunfire erupted again from the far end of the alley. Ava turned immediately. One final wave. She raised her rifle. But then, a voice crackled over the helicopter speaker. Last evac rope deployed. A second rope dropped near her position. Ava looked at it. Then at the advancing enemy line. Then at the sky. Then at Reyes, now inside the helicopter watching her. He was shouting something. She couldn't hear it over the rotors. But she knew. He wanted her to come. Ava took one step toward the rope. Then stopped. Because behind her, the line was still breaking. If she left now, the remaining extraction would collapse. The soldiers would overrun the LZ. And more people would die. Ava slowly lowered her rifle. She looked up at Reyes one last time. And gave a small nod. Not goodbye. Not farewell. Just understanding. Then she turned away from the rope. And walked back into the smoke. The battlefield exploded into motion again. Helicopter gunfire opened up, suppressing enemy positions. But Ava was already moving forward. Not to survive. Not to escape. But to hold the line just long enough for everyone else to leave. Bullets cracked around her. Smoke swallowed everything. But she didn't stop. She kept firing. Step by step. Shot by shot. Until the last echoes of extraction faded behind her. And then, silence. Not peace. Just absence. Ava stood alone in the ruins once more. The helicopters were gone. The flare was gone. The battlefield still burned. But she was still standing. Barely. She lowered her weapon slowly. and looked at the empty horizon. For the first time in hours, there was no immediate gunfire. Just wind, smoke, and the distant sound of retreating war machines. Ava exhaled, not in relief, but in exhaustion so deep it felt like sinking. She had no idea how long she stood there. Minutes, maybe seconds, maybe longer. Then, radio static again. Weak, distant. Survivor identified, extraction complete. Ava closed her eyes. She didn't smile. She didn't collapse. She simply stood in the ruins of a war zone that tried to erase her. And failed.